Welcome back, friends. This week we're going to talk about, it's in the coaching community, it's kind of like a buzzword right now, and so I don't know if other people have heard about it, but nervous system dysregulation. You've heard it called what?
Chronic sympathetic state.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Nervous system dysregulation. When Kim brought it up, I was like, that's what we talk about. I know what that is, but I was like, what are they specifically referring to? But I believe it's this idea that you're in this chronic sympathetic state 100% of the time, right? Oftentimes that's triggered by trauma that hasn't been worked through, right? It's this idea that your body's constantly in this fight or flight, and it's created those patterns in your brain that's like, hey, we're in this fight or flight state, the sympathetic state, to stay alive. We're staying alive, so it's working for us. So we're gonna, continue this pattern at all costs because it's keeping us alive. And so it creates these we've talked about highways in the brain before, right? Those neural pathways. So it creates these highways that's like, oh, that's the shortest point from A to B. And because you get that positive reinforcement, you're still alive, your brain's going to keep creating this nervous system dysregulation, this autonomic dysregulation, right? The challenge with that is that, as we've talked about, right, that's chronic stress. So that's going to change our physical body. That's going to create problems, not just with our neurochemistry, our, let's see, if we're in a nervous system dysregulation, we've got high levels of cortisol, which means we'll have bottomed out norepinephrine and epinephrine. Our GABA will probably be low, that anti-anxiety neurotransmitter. Will even influence our dopamine and our serotonin, because we don't have the resources to produce those neurotransmitters in adequate amounts. Right. So your brain is reallocating those resources to stay alive. And so, but that also makes those chronic physical changes, right? That change to the blood flow to our prefrontal cortex. So it's just that primal brain gets that constant feedback, but creates changes in our heart health and our lung health. Will change to make changes even in our peripheral circulation, where we won't have as much peripheral circulation because your body's constantly in that fight or flight mode. So it is, I often say that things like create a habit, but oftentimes when we create a habit, we may not always be aware of it. But with the nervous system dysregulation, it's a little bit more, is this pattern that is maybe a step up from habit.
I think about it like when I, after the flood, when I was so stressed out, right? So, and then I had the new diagnosis of PTSD. I used to describe it as like, I was addicted to stress.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I was addicted to that high level of like, it's not even worry for me. That's not how my energy shows up. Just like hyper-vigiliance, well, you know, like all the classic PTSD examples, right? And you just like, and you kind of start creating your own chaos, right? To kind of stay at this high level of just stressed out state. Which is really just my sympathetic nervous system, just constantly, which is fight or flight for you guys. Constantly, that was in charge and that was running the show, right? Like my brain told my body every day that there was a lion chasing us, and we just had to keep running. You just have to keep running. You just have to keep running, which creates chronic stress, right? Fatigue, anxiety, depression, PTSD, all of those things. And I think I agree with you. I think a lot of like this nervous system dysregulation is turned on, if you will, by trauma.
I think, I mean, everybody trauma is different for everybody, right? Yeah, that what may have been traumatic for me may not be traumatic for somebody else. But I think oftentimes we see with this chronic sympathetic state, this nervous system dysregulation is usually chronic trauma, right? So sometimes it is a chronic stressor, something like PTSD, or a chronic somebody was chronically in the survival mode.
Like being
for whatever
in a domestic
reason.
Violence relationship.
Exactly. That creates this initial pattern, and then it just kind of snowballs from there. I think what I see oftentimes with this chronic sympathetic state, this nervous system dysregulation, is more the hyper-vigilance, that hyper-aware, that I could see how you would describe it as addicted to stress. Because it's just, you're just always on. Right? Like you're always on, and you're on 100% all of the time, wherever you are. So then that creates problems with being around other people, with relationships, but even with our sleep. I know folks who've had traumatic situations in the service where they were hyper aware, right? Like they had to be hyper aware of the surroundings, and so that just triggers that dysregulation, if you will.
Because I mean, if you put it in context, right? Like if I'm in a battlefield, or if I'm being stalked by a lion, why in the world would my body be like, we need some sleep? If we sleep, we die.
Exactly.
Right?
So. If this pattern is this chronic, like I said, that positive reinforcement of that, no, we're in this stressful sympathetic state. We're staying alive, so we've got to stay in the sympathetic state. And you're asking your body and your mind, oh, it's okay, you can relax, you can be in this parasympathetic state. It's okay, to like be vulnerable, to like let your guard down.
Right.
Your brain's like, no way, you're trying to kill us.
Right. Right. And I like to explain to my clients, like the primal brain, where the majority, like our thoughts come from two different areas, right? The primal brain, the prefrontal cortex. The primal brain's voice is usually at a yell. Right? Where the prefrontal cortex is at like a conversational level, right? And of course, right? Like primal brain is in charge of survival, period. I want someone to yell at me if this lion is stalking me. I don't want a conversational level of like, maybe you should look around. Right. So of course, and so then we think, when we don't have mindset work, and we don't know where our thoughts come from, and we don't know our thoughts are optional, we just think every thought that comes to our brain is factual truth, right? Of course we're going to listen to the loudest voice,
the one that's screaming at you. Yes, you can't ignore it, or it's hard to ignore.
Right. Right. So it makes sense to me, like going into this, it would be very difficult. Like if you were to come into coaching, especially like with a life coach schools coach like me, that we do the model, and your thoughts create your emotions, which create your actions, which create the results in your life. It would be very hard to move into that prefrontal cortex, because the primal brain is used to being in charge, driving the nervous system, which creates the right chemical profile to continue that feedback loop. Right?
Exactly.
So like you said, it's like, I don't have time to rest, digest, be vulnerable, heal,
right? Because
this loop is running. So I can see where thought work wouldn't be as effective. Right. Where I didn't know, like I was telling you before we started this, when I started the life coach school, I had also started meditating.
Yes.
And I'm like an active person, so I'm used to like doing body stuff. I didn't know I was doing somatic type things in conjunction with learning how to manage my brain. where a lot of coaches don't get that. They're just like, here's the model, everything's created by your thoughts, right? And for some people that are in this nervous system dysregulation, it's not super helpful.
I see what you mean. Yeah, because you're kind of just getting one perspective if you're just going through the thought work process. Yes. Yeah. Right. I could see that.
Yeah. So like the question is, and you see like in the counseling world, like they talk about EMDR, like how it's helpful with PTSD. And I guess some people it is. I'm not saying it's not. Yeah. It was not helpful for me, but for some people it's helpful. It is like, imagine the primal brain is thinking that there is a physical threat to your physical safety. Mm-hmm. I use the word twice. I'm giving you guys hints. Physical, right? So, of course, to calm that part of your brain down, we have to make sure that that part of your brain knows that physically you are safe.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. That you are not having a physical threat to this body.
Right.
So then we have to start with the body to get the nervous system to regulate again, to be able to access the thoughts and the part of brain you want to create different thoughts and different neural pathways, thus different emotional states.
Exactly. So it's engaging, the physical body to create that switch, right? Yeah. So sometimes people are in that nervous system dysregulation, don't even feel like they have a switch, right? Like there's no switch, there's no like I can turn this off. But we can begin to create that if we start with the physical changes first.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I do have to say, because I do know some EMDR practitioners who are very good at what they do. And the reason behind EMDR and why it's supposed to be helpful is because you're engaging the eye movement, right? Which is a physical aspect. Now, if you're going to explore EMDR, get a practitioner who knows what they're doing and who've done it a while. Yeah. And have got good results, because I know some fantastic practitioners out there. I also know some folks who try to do EMDR and don't quite have a grasp of that whole therapy. So if you tried it and it hasn't worked, try something else, but you may not completely write it off. It may be the practitioner just didn't have as much experience with it.
Yeah.
That being said, because it is a physical change, like our mind processes emotions through our physical body as well. Yep. Yeah. So if you're thinking of how can we address this nervous system dysregulation with physical therapies, right? So with movement. Yeah. I was introduced to it from a hydrotherapy perspective. We do a lot of hydrotherapy in naturopathic medicine historically. And so hydrotherapy is that use of hot and cold. So that shock to the system with putting an ice pack on the body, or like an ice cold cloth on the body, and then a warm cloth will begin to create that switch, right? From that sympathetic to that parasympathetic state. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Things like tapping, yep. Right? Yeah. Your experience with like EFT and tapping, creating that safe space, mm-hmm. And engaging those thoughts at the same time, mm-hmm. Right? We're trying to change the frequency. So when you're engaging the physical body and you're addressing the thoughts at the same time, what we're doing is we're trying to create again, that switch to move to the parasympathetic, but you're actually changing the frequencies within the body, actually. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So engaging more from the body up instead of the mind first.
Yes. Yeah. A fellow coach, Christina, posted the other day, like just taking your arm and then grabbing it and then squeezing a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's another option. I know like deep belly breathes, like diaphragmatic breathing, right? Because the body knows, like when you're stressed or you're being chased by a lion, you were not doing diaphragmatic breathing.
Yeah.
You were in your chest panting.
You're up here. Yeah. You're like,
right?
Yeah.
So when we're saying in chest breathing, it's signaling that sympathetic nervous system. There's a threat, right? So when we can be intentional and pull into that belly breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, it's triggering the brain like, hey, we wouldn't be breathing like this if we were unsafe.
Exactly.
We must be safe because we're breathing deeper. Right. So that can move it. So touch. Oh, taking your hand and going skin to skin to your heart and like patting it. Yeah. Because that mimics in our brain when us as babies and our mom patting us. Yes. And so the brain also then kind of has like a pause moment. It's like, oh, wait, this is a safety pattern. Familiar. Yes. Right. Yeah. It's a safe space. I must not be in threat because no, mom would not be patting me as a baby if we were running from a lion. Right. Yes. So I have a lot of my clients, we do, it's pulled from somatic therapy. Like when we're processing emotions, is like place your hand on your heart, close your eyes. We're already in a safe space. So we've established that they're in a safe place, and wherever they've chosen their safe place to be, going into belly, some breaths. And then from there to themselves, like telling themselves like, I've got you, baby girl. You're safe with me. You know, I love you. I'm here for you. Yeah. Which also in that tone of voice, like calms down. Yeah. And then we do a body scan. We start from the head and we slowly just scan the body, feeling what emotions, like what sensations are going on in the body. Right. And then describing those sensations. Like if you have tight shoulders, like describe those tight shoulders with as much detail as possible. Yeah. You know, that's one way. Meditation for me was very helpful to just ground into the body, ground into my breath, feel my body, what is going on in my body. And I feel like there was one more thing that we use. What was it? Oh, like from positive intelligence psychology, like looking at something, like looking at an object and like looking at the details of it and staring at it, using the visual, or listening for things way out, listening to things like really close, right? Or like taking your fingers and rubbing them together and feeling the ridges of your fingertips, or like wiggling your toes and feeling all the toes, right? Yeah. It's just going back to the body and experiencing life and the body, if that makes sense. Well, it does, because what you're doing is when you're slowing down, so even like wiggling your toes and rubbing your fingers and belly breathing, all of those examples, you're engaging the part of your brain that says, wait a minute, if I can pay attention to these details, then I must be safe, right? Because it's like you're changing that lens, right? So instead of that lens of, oh, I'm being chased by a lion, I mean, like, I don't have time to look at the scenery and get me, to a safe place. And now you're like, oh, I'm going to enjoy the scenery, right? You're kind of zooming out in that lens and asking your brain to focus on something different. And so you're creating that switch to say, oh, okay, well, if my focus is on the details, okay, then I can slow down. Like you're very validating that you're in that safe place. Yeah. And then with the breathing, with the thought work, you can further go into that parasympathetic state and start to pull, and draw out of that sympathetic to be like, oh, we're creating a bridge now instead of all or nothing. Yes. Let's create that bridge. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's kind of for you guys, like that's how you move out, and like how you know you're kind of stuck in that is like that high stress, that overwhelm, anxiety, like chronic, right? And like just that snappiness, like frustration on edge.
being short.
Yeah.
Like that. Sometimes people will describe it as like a short fuse, right? Or hair trigger that like quick to react and be in that place. For some people I have seen, is it sometimes that chronic sympathetic stress, that nervous system dysregulation is a normal part of their life.
Oh yeah. I can list off people that have lived in that. For decades as one person.
And so sometimes those folks don't recognize that there's a different state that they could live in. And sometimes, like, if you describe to them a different state, it's hard to even imagine, like, you're talking Chinese to me right now and I don't understand it. And so, but our brains are very plastic. I mean, like, we have that neuroplasticity. It's very moldable. So we, may have to find different paths or different routes to create that bridge for folks. But our brain is very resilient in that sense that we can, change focus.
Yes.
And get out of that dysregulated state if chosen.
Because that is not, that is an optional state to live in. Right, like because I can hear, like, I just know those people, and it's like, wow, the world is going to hell and all of this stuff. It's like, well, as long as you look for evidence, you'll find
you're gonna find it,
right? Like, the world's always been chaotic,
right?
It's always been 50% great, 50% crappy, right? It's just, what 50% do you choose to focus on?
That's true. So I'm gonna just a little rabbit trail that we've been describing this nervous system dysregulation, right? Like, coming from this place of trauma and this being this having this hyper awareness and hyper vigilance. But when you said addicted to stress, so it can also look like folks who are addicted to stress. Okay, so stress in the sense that they're busy all the time, but not really doing anything. Or addicted to, sometimes people are addicted to drama, right? They're addicted to drama in their life or other people's lives because they like that stress, that like, and so sound like you're continuing to feed that side of your brain. So it's a little bit, I say that to hopefully describe a little bit of a spectrum, because some people may not relate to that hyper aware, that hyper vigilant, that 100% always on, right? For them, it might be you're addicted to stress, like, and we may think that, I may have fallen in this category a few times in my life, in that I didn't realize I was addicted to stress, but like, I was always busy. We were always doing things, right? And sometimes those things are really productive, but sometimes it was, you just do things to do things, right? And I mean, they were productive, and they were things like, community service and doing things for the church and doing things at work and doing things for other people and the neighbors. But it was like, you didn't sit down. You just keep going. You're always going. And there's not ever like this, I'm going to slow down.
And there's this what I've been reported to is that there's an uncomfortableness of slowing down, and your mind is constantly racing. I'm wasting time. And then shaming you for relaxing. Like, that is also part of the component, is like an inability to relax and be still.
Right. That all falls under this nervous system dysregulation umbrella. In my opinion, because it's the same thing. It's just, maybe not on this far end of the spectrum, but it's still like, oh, you're still having trouble being in that parasympathetic state. So, I just.
So remember, we got to go to the body first.
Yes.
We got to calm the body, tell the body it's safe, put it in a safe space, feel the body, experience the body. And by no means, because I know how the humans are,
yeah,
with an eye roll, by no means are we saying that if you have PTSD or trauma that has not been processed with a professional, that you should be doing this shit alone. Like, we have to say this is crazy to me, but
get some support. Get support.
If you have not done it with a professional,
yeah,
don't go be doing this crap alone. You need to be doing it with a professional, with some support to help you create safety for you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. Help you, to see that and kind of be that guide, especially especially the beginning of your journey. And trying to create those bridges. Yes.
Yeah. All right, friends. Hope you guys have a great week.